Walking without assistance, one carer encouraging the client. Check the care plan handling assessment. Tell the client you will help them to walk. Encourage them to do as much for themselves as possible. The carer stands to one side of the client. If they have a weaker side, stand to that side. Stand slightly behind and facing the client. Do make sure you can make eye contact with the client. Encourage them to take small steps. Using a walking stick. There are many types of walking sticks, for example, standard stick, one stick, tripod, stick with 3 feet, quadruped, stick with 4 feet. More feet provide increased stability to the person using it. The walking aid must be the right height for the client. If they're too low, the client will become hunched over it, throwing their centre of gravity forwards, which could cause the client to fall. If they're too high, the client's arms will be bent upwards, throwing their centre of gravity backwards, which could cause the client to fall. To use the stick, the client should hold the stick on their weaker side. Move the stick to nearly arm's length in front of them. If it has more than 1 foot, all the feet should be placed firmly on the floor. Step with the stronger leg, the one away from the stick, forward, level with the stick. Bring the weaker leg, the one closer to the stick, also level with the stick. Move the stick forwards, repeat the sequence. Check. Is the rubber ferrule or ferrules at the bottom of the stick in good condition? If not, have them replaced immediately, or the client could fall. Using a walking frame, Zimmer, etc. There are many types of walking frames, some with wheels, some without wheels, some with shopping bags fitted to them. They must be the right height for the client. If they're too low, the client will become hunched over it, throwing their centre of gravity forwards, which could cause the client to fall. If they're too high, the client's arms will be bent upwards, throwing their centre of gravity backwards, which could also cause the client to fall. To use the frame, the client should move the frame to nearly arm's length in front of them. All the feet should be placed firmly on the floor. Hold the frame firmly with both hands. Step forward with the weaker leg first up to the frame. Then bring the other, stronger leg also up to the frame. Move the frame to nearly arm's length and continue the sequence. Check. Are the rubber ferrules at the bottom of the frame in good condition? If not, have them replaced immediately, or the client could fall. Falling. Accident books reveal that people in care environments are susceptible to falls, particularly in elderly care. Fall prevention is a very important part of care practice, as is not exposing clients or care workers to any preventable danger. 1 injured person is bad enough. 2 injured persons is worse. Despite what you might think, despite what your natural instincts tell you, never try to catch someone who's falling. Trying to stop them usually results in 2 injured people. If the falling person is nearby and not being assisted at the time, do not try to catch them. Try to push any dangerous items or the person out of the way. Clear their path. If they fall, let them go. 3 essential points. Never bear the bulk of the person's weight. Never attempt to raise someone from the floor yourself. Do not risk making matters worse. If the person starts to fall while being assisted, assisted falling. Quickly step behind the person. Keep your feet a hip's width apart, one foot slightly back. This provides you with a stable base. Bend your knees and keep them bent. This helps protect your back as the legs and knees work as shock absorbers. It's very important that you only do this if you have practiced it several times with a colleague safely and you know what you're doing. You're in physical contact with and supporting, assisting someone as they lose their balance. You don't attempt to stop the person falling, but simply intend to soften the blow a bit. Otherwise, if they fall, let them go. Helping someone up with assistance, one carer. Check the care plan handling assessment. Go to the side the client is going to move towards. Kneel down at the client's eye level. Tell the client you're going to help them back up. Follow the technique for turning a person over with assistance, where one carer assists the client to turn over. Once the client is on their side, their upper hand presses on the floor beside their head to push their shoulder up. Remember, do not bear the bulk of the person's weight. As the client pushes their shoulders up, the client's hand that is nearest the floor swings under the client's head to help push their shoulders up further. While they're doing this, the client transfers their weight onto their bent knees, which brings the client up onto all fours. Just for a moment, keep the client in this position to catch their breath. Place a low stool, chair, seat, etc. over their lower legs and gently touching their buttocks. Encourage the client back onto the seat. Settle them on the seat for a while to make sure they're over the shock of falling and have regained their strength and composure. Adopt a suitable safe standing from sitting technique, which you should have learned earlier. If for some reason you have to bear the bulk of the person's weight to help them get back up, do not do it. Never ever lift someone up from the floor physically. Either the client gets themselves up, the carer supports the client to get themselves up, a suitable hoist is used, a specialist aid is used, for example, an inflatable lifting aid. Restricted space. Some clients fall in a place where it's difficult to gain access to help them back up, particularly if a hoist is needed. Therefore, you may need to reposition them in order to gain access with the hoist. You might have to use equipment such as a handling sling or slide sheet. You might have to use techniques such as sitting the person to achieve an accessible position, turning the person to achieve an accessible position, sliding them slightly to achieve an accessible position, or combinations of the above. Remember, in moving the person, you must not bear the bulk of the client's weight. Repositioning someone in a chair. It's better to prevent someone slipping down the chair in the first place. Was the client sitting back fully enough in the chair in the first place? Is the chair too slippery? Is the chair simply too big for the client? Is the chair seat too high for the client? Can the client's feet touch the ground? If their feet cannot touch the ground and the chair genuinely cannot be changed, what about a footstool? Would their feet rest on that? Maybe there's a gap between the back of the chair and their bottom. Would a cushion placed in the gap prevent them slipping down? What about chair risers or raisers? A tilting or reclining chair? Anti-slip devices? Repositioning someone in a chair without assistance, one carer encouraging the client. Check the care plan handling assessment. Drop down in front of the client at their eye level to make eye contact. Tell the client you're going to help them get back up the chair. Encourage them to help themselves as much as possible. The client rests their feet firmly on the floor, one of their feet slightly back at the base of the seat, the other foot, preferably the stronger leg, slightly forwards. Their feet are spaced 1 hip's width apart. Then the client places their hands on the arms of the chair, slightly behind their shoulder level. The client leans slightly forwards, just so that their head comes over their foot, which is at the base of the seat. The client leans forwards very gently and pushes up slightly with their hands, which causes their bottom to lift. At the same time, they push back with their feet and their bottom moves back into the chair, so that their bottom is back as far as it will go. Sometimes, as the client pushes back, wiggling their bottom from side to side helps them creep back up the seat more easily. Repositioning someone in a chair with assistance, one carer. Check the care plan handling assessment. Drop down in front of the client at their eye level to make eye contact. Tell the client you're going to help them get back up the chair. Encourage them to help themselves as much as possible. Help the client rest their feet firmly on the floor, one of their feet slightly back at the base of the seat, the other foot, preferably the stronger leg, slightly forwards. Assist them to space their feet 1 hip's width apart. Then help the client place their hands on the arms of the chair, slightly behind their shoulder level. Guide the client to lean slightly forwards, just so that their head comes over their foot, which is at the base of the seat. Encourage the client to push up slightly with their hands. At the same time, they push back with their feet to ease their bottom back into the chair. You may have to repeat this more than once. Wheelchairs are often not serviced and maintained properly. Areas to be checked include pumped-up tyres, good tyre tread, working brake, sides fitting properly, foot plates in good order, heel rest in good order, spokes intact, wheels and bearings in good condition, correct cushion, safety belt in good order. Any wheelchairs not in good order should be removed from use until made good. Before any care worker uses a wheelchair with a client, they should be exposed to the reality of being in a wheelchair driven by one of their colleagues. It can be a real eye-opener. During your trip out, you will also experience, among other novelties, being taken up and down steps in a wheelchair. How must it feel for a client, especially if the care worker is not so experienced? In fact, to what extent could that client be in danger, and what might those dangers be? If the client slumps to the left or right of the wheelchair, using wheelchair side supports to prop the client up. For a short-term solution, a chair cushion might help. Maybe the client falls backwards in the wheelchair, causing them to slip down. Using a convex back support to keep the client in an upright position. Perhaps the client slides forwards in the wheelchair. Put a solid seat insert on top of the wheelchair seat and underneath the wheelchair seat cushion. Why not look to solve the problem itself? Are the footrests high enough? Would moving the wheelchair closer to the table help? Is a wedged cushion behind the client necessary? Helping a client into and out of a wheelchair from a car can be difficult, so keep the brakes locked when the wheelchair is stopped. Keep the safety belt done up. Parking the car as close to the exit of the building as possible. Park as far enough away from any curb as possible. This reduces any differences in car seat and wheelchair seat height. Handling aids that can assist wheelchair transfers include slide sheets, slide boards, turning plates. Face the wheelchair at a slight angle to the car door. Edge of the wheelchair seat halfway along the car seat. This improves both access and ease of transfer. Head height access is a common problem when carrying out car and wheelchair transfers. Be careful of the client's head. Storing wheelchairs in a car boot. Ideally, if a wheelchair is going to be used regularly for being taken in and out of a car, a lightweight option is preferable. Dismantle the wheelchair, arms off, foot plates off, seat cushion off, fold the wheelchair up. Put a sheet over the floor of the boot and hang its end out of the boot. Rest the wheelchair against the boot over the sheet where it hangs out of the boot. You then face the wheelchair and the car boot. Bend your knees. Take hold of the lower part of the wheelchair. Straighten your legs to lift the wheelchair, using the sheet as a slide to slide the wheelchair into the boot. Use the sheet to move the wheelchair around and, in due course, out of the boot. Keep your spine in its natural S shape and your knees bent when moving wheelchairs about car boots. Wheelchairs and steps. Going down a step. Face the step, foot on tipping lever. Push your foot down to tilt chair backwards. Push the chair so back wheels are at the edge of the step. Allow the back wheels to gently go over the step. Lower the front wheels to the ground. If the person is heavy, go down the step backwards instead of facing it. Going up a step. Face the step. Your foot on the tipping lever. Push your foot down to tilt chair backwards. Push the chair forward so that the front wheels are on top of the step. Lean against the chair to push the back wheels onto the step. Despite what many people think, hoists and their slings are not complicated. They're very straightforward. While hoists are more or less similar, hoists and slings do vary. Always follow the manufacturer's instructions. If you do not know what the manufacturer's instructions say, do not use that hoist until you do. Find the instructions, contact the manufacturer, their dealer or website and get the instructions. Fitting the sling. The client is sitting. Remember, hoists and slings vary. Always follow the manufacturer's instructions. Check the care plan handling assessment. Drop down slightly to one side of the client to make eye contact. Tell the client you're going to fit the sling in order to help them move using the hoist. Encourage the client to do as much for themselves as they can. Ask the client to lean slightly forward. Lean, not slide or shuffle forwards. This creates a gap between the client's back and the seat they're sitting on. You hold the lower edge of the sling, the part that goes by the client's bottom, in the palm of your hand, and the upper edge of the sling, the part that goes by the client's head, in your other hand. This allows you to keep the sling taut. It will not flap about when you're fitting it. gently slide the lower edge of the sling behind the client so that it rests, touching the client's back by their coccyx or tailbone. Make sure the centre line of the sling is straight along the client's back, it follows their spine, and that it does not have any creases. Rest the sling against the client's back and ask the client to sit back in their seat. The client's body weight traps the sling in place behind them. Often the fabric of the sling behind the small of the client's back can ruck up behind the client. This ruck releases and causes the client to jolt when they're moved. To stop this happening, you must clear that ruck now by kneeling at the side of the client. Place the palm of your hand at the small of the client's back, facing the seat, not the client. You should be able to feel the rucked up sling fabric. Ease the fabric gently out behind the client and forwards to smooth out the ruck. This will prevent the client jolting when the hoist moves them. On your own, or with help, repeat the same on the other side of the sling. Now, to ensure the leg supports are even, move in front of the client again, staying down by their feet. Use the Clark's shoes technique to create a space between the client's legs and the surface they're sitting on. This gap makes it easier for you to fit the leg supports and makes it both comfortable and safe for the client. Check: are the leg supports taut and flat underneath the client's legs? If not, feed them. Do not pull or tug them underneath the client's legs. Place the palm of your right hand, facing down towards the chair, on the top of the leg support to the outside of the client's left leg, your right side. As you feed the leg support underneath the client's leg with your right hand, use your left hand to ease it through. Now, swap hands and repeat the process for the leg support under the client's other leg. Do not pull or tug the client. The Clark's shoes gap makes feeding the leg support simple and safe. Pass the leg support straps through each other. Check this with your sling manufacturer. It varies. The sling is now ready for connecting to the hoist. Fitting a hoist sling. The client is lying down. Remember, hoists and slings vary. Always follow the manufacturer's instructions. Check the care plan handling assessment. Drop down at the side of the client to make eye contact. Tell the client you're going to fit the sling in order to help them up using the hoist. Encourage the client to do as much for themselves as they can. Have the client roll onto their side. You should have learned how to do this earlier. Roll the sling halfway along its length and fit it underneath the client, exactly as you would for a full-length slide sheet. Do you need to go back in this program to find out how to do that? Whether you use one carer, two carers, etc. is obviously determined by the care plan handling assessment. Disconnecting the sling. Quite simply, reverse the process for fitting it, whether the person is now sitting, lying, etc. Connecting the sling to the hoist. The number of connectors the sling has to connect to the hoist will vary according to the slings and hoists you will need to use. Remember, hoists and slings vary. Always follow the manufacturer's instructions. Locking the hoist's brakes. When you do or don't lock the brakes of a hoist, seems to change with the tide. Some hoists are designed not to be locked for some tasks, so that the hoist can self-correct the client's movement to make the client feel more comfortable, whereas some hoists are not designed to do this. Basically, you have to check and follow the manufacturer's instructions for the equipment you're intending to use. Which order do the sling connectors connect to the sling bar? As a general principle, connect the upper connectors of the sling, the head ones, to the sling bar of the hoist first. This means that if something were to go wrong, you have provided some support for the client's head. However, you must check and follow your manufacturer's instructions. If there are several connectors, follow the manufacturer's instructions. Transferring a client to a chair with a hoist. Remember, hoists and slings vary. Always follow the manufacturer's instructions. Your purpose is to ensure the client is correctly positioned in the seat, that their bottom is back in the seat of the chair, that their posture is upright. To get the client right back in the seat, raise the sling bar to its full height. Push the hoist back into the seat as far as it will go. The client's back should be touching or nearly touching the back of the seat. Now, as you lower the sling bar, the client's back should travel down the back of the seat. Occasionally, more is required to steer them back deeply into the chair. So take hold of the handles on the sling and guide the client via the sling. This may require a second carer or helper. Remember, keep your knees bent, spine in its natural S shape, and to use your body weight and balance rather than pulling or pushing. Hoisting into and out of a wheelchair. Remember, hoists and slings vary. Always follow the manufacturer's instructions. Some people think you can't hoist into or out of a wheelchair. Well, you can. The techniques remain the same as for hoisting into or out of any seat. However, you must make sure the wheelchair brakes work properly and the wheelchair brakes are locked before using. As soon as the client is in the wheelchair and the sling removed, do up the safety harness in the wheelchair. One or two carers to use the hoist. Some people are confused as to whether there should be one or two people to use a hoist. There's no specific handling legislation that says you must only ever use 2 people when hoisting. If someone tells you otherwise, ask them to show you the legislation. Some hoists are more easy to use with one person than others. You must check whether you've entered into any contractual obligations to hoist with 2 care workers when providing the client with service and any local inspectorate policy. Accepting contractual obligation and local inspectorate policy, whether 1 or 2 carers should be used, depends upon the handling assessment, which would include the type of hoist, the intended use of the hoist, the guidance of the manufacturer's instructions, the needs of the client, their specific difficulties, the physical environment, the sling to be used. Can you use a hoist to transport someone? There's no right or wrong answer. It's a matter of judgment as determined through the handling assessment, which will include, among other considerations, type of equipment, the distance to be travelled, the client's dignity and privacy, the needs of the client, the advantages and disadvantages of alternative options. Emergency in case of fire. If a life is imminently at risk, handling regulations are suspended. Lie the client on a strong duvet, etc. 2 carers, 1 at each of the top corners of the duvet, take hold of the duvet firmly. The client is dragged on the duvet to safety. Safe techniques versus dangerous techniques. You're going to see a series of dangerous, unsafe techniques. They have been, and in some cases are still widely used by many care workers right now. Firstly, you'll be shown a brief introductory summary of some of the main dangers to look for. Secondly, you'll be shown some dangerous, unsafe practices. After each dangerous practice, you'll be given a closing summary of some of the main dangers. As each new unsafe practice is shown to you, see how many more dangers you can spot. So, an introductory summary of the dangers to look out for. The spine not being in its natural S shape. Subsequently, the back muscles doing all the work, taking all the strain. The carer or carers twisting. Something of the client is over the carer is under the client. This means the carer or carers are bearing the bulk of the client's weight. The carer or carers are facing the wrong way, which means they can't use their body weight and balance to help the client move. The client is moving away from the leader, carer, rather than towards them. No verbal or visual contact between client or carers. They're not working as a team. Reaching, stretching. If the carer's feet are too far or too close apart, they have poor balance. The feet should be 1 hip's width apart. Where are they going? Is the direction of travel clear and distinct? The Australian lift is bad news. What dangers can you spot? Australian lift summary dangers. Spine not in its natural S shape. Back muscles doing all the work. Carer nearest us is twisting. Something of them over you, you under them. Bearing the bulk of the person's weight. Carers facing completely the wrong direction. Doing different things, not a team. No verbal or visual contact with each other and the client. No control. Carers are reaching and stretching. Now have a look at the cradle lift. What can you see wrong? Cradle lift summary dangers. Spine not in its natural S shape. Back muscles doing all the work. Carers will have to twist. Something of them over you, you under them. Bearing the bulk of the person's weight. Carers facing completely the wrong direction. No verbal or visual contact with each other and the client. No control. The carers reaching and stretching. And they stoop forwards to get hands underneath. How did you get on with the cradle lift? Now consider the flip turn. Flip turn summary dangers. Spine not in its natural S shape. The back muscles are doing the work. Something of them over you, you under them. Bearing the bulk of the person's weight. Carers facing completely the wrong direction. Client moving away from the carer, not towards the carer. No verbal or visual contact with each other and the client. No control. The carers are reaching and stretching. The person is raised and turned, flipped onto their side. What do you make of this, the drag lift? Drag lift summary dangers. Spine not in its natural S shape. The back muscles are doing the work. Carers are twisting. The handler puts arm or hand under the person's armpit. Something of them over you, you under them. bearing the bulk of the person's weight. Carers facing completely the wrong direction. Going where? No verbal or visual contact with each other and the client. No control. The carers are reaching and stretching. Literally drags them into place. Are you starting to see a pattern emerge? Well, here's another. Lifting, pulling from in front. Summary dangers. Spine not in its natural S shape. Back muscles doing the work. Carer is twisting. Something of them over you, you under them. Bearing the bulk of the person's weight. Carer facing the wrong direction. Where are they going? What are they doing? Sitting, standing? Is the direction of travel clear? No verbal or visual contact with each other. The carers are reaching, stretching. The handler has little or no control of the move. The carer's feet are too wide apart, highly likely to lose balance. If the person falls, down goes the handler. This next move seems innocent, but look closely. The arm pull. Consider the dangers. Question 1. Is this lifting? Question 2. As the carer pulls, who will bear the bulk of whose weight? Question 3. Would a no-lifting policy have been sufficient to have stopped this move? Question 4. Would a do not bear the bulk of a client's weight policy have been better? Now consider walking by standing in front of client and walking backwards. What dangers did you spot? Here's another often used dangerous practice. Pulling someone up from behind a chair, wheelchair, etc. What did you spot wrong with that practice? Here's one example of a dangerous practice called flexion. There are many more examples. Why is flexion dangerous? Of the many problems with flexion, its hallmarks are the straight knees and the bent back, no natural S shape. Handling aids. Never use equipment you've not been trained to use. The best aids remove the need for moving and handling, such as a hoist for toileting immobile people. The next best aids are those that make moving and handling easier and safer, such as a transfer board to help a person from their bed to their wheelchair. There are scores of handling aids. Here are just a few. Track hoists, portable hoists, stand aids, bath hoists, bath seats, rope ladders, leg lifters, monkey poles, hand blocks, slide boards, slide sheets, handling slings, handling belts, turning plates or discs, bed risers, chair risers, raised toilet seats, bath rails. And we haven't even started on mobility aids, such as frames, sticks, etc.
You will now be given a test sheet. Don't worry about it, it's not to catch you out. Instead, it is to show that you know more than you may even have realised. Each question has one proper answer. Put a ring around either A, B, C or D to show which answer you're selecting. When the test sheet is complete, fill in the details at the end so that it can be sent back to Mulberry House for marking and, all being well, the issuing of a training certificate.